I just never thought that my life could change that quickly.
Maureen Brooks is referring to the time in her life when she found out her mother, Glenna Brooks, had an incurable, life-threatening condition.
So my mom was diagnosed sometime in my high school years with something called interstitial pulmonary fibrosis, which basically means that they don't know what's wrong with her. It's just sort of a cover diagnosis for a general condition where her lungs harden over time, and they never really figured out a cause. But she started experiencing symptoms when I was probably about in 6th grade, getting so bad in 7th grade that I remember her going to the emergency room one day and having a biopsy, and I remember dealing with that in school. And obviously they had a really hard time figuring out what was going on with her. So the years progressed, and it was probably about high school when they really started deciding that they thought she needed a transplant. And she went through a couple doctors before they got to that conclusion. A few times she was diagnosed with asthma or COPD, stuff like that, and they put her on immune boosters because they thought maybe that was the problem, but her immune system was actually attacking her lungs, so those drugs made her disease worse. She was put on the transplant list, I think my sophomore year of high school, maybe my junior year, and in April of 2012, which was the senior year of high school for me, that's when she actually had her transplant.
In 2012, Glenna was one of 28,051 people who received organ transplants. There were over 120,000 people on the waiting list at this time. The waiting game associated with organ donation changes the way families go about their lives and make decisions.
It changed where I wanted to go to college initially, because when I was picking schools, my mom hadn't had her transplant, and I was very concerned that if something were to happen, I would need to get home quickly. So out of state was, it was an option. My family would have made it work, but in my mind, it wasn't an option. I wanted to be able to get home in an hour or 2 hours in case she went into transplant, she went into the ER, something awful happened. I wanted to be able to be there for her. And so I'm very, very glad I picked Purdue, but that was a huge factor in deciding. And I guess now, to me, I just have a better understanding that life is very fleeting. Things change very quickly, and it's something that's always in the back of my mind. It doesn't govern my day-to-day activities, but I am always concerned about my mom. She could go into rejection at any point. She's on a ton of medications like every transplant patient is, but your body could reject those organs because that's not their tissue at any point, and I'm very glad that I would be able to get to her in time. And it just makes me enjoy what I have and the small things that bring joy to my mom. I see she takes joy in the smallest things, but it's interesting to see that perspective because I think it's really important, and it's not something that everybody gets.
Maureen's outlook on life was not the only one changed by her mother's illness. Glenna did not used to be the organ donation supporter that she is today.
So I remember when I was 16 and we were going in to get my license, and they were asking if I wanted to be an organ donor, as they always do. I said yes, and she was like, wait, no, no, are you sure? She was very hesitant about it. I remember her saying, I don't want them to cut up my baby, that sort of thing. And at that point, she was even considering a transplant herself. She was just very hesitant about the whole situation. But now, having gone through it herself, us having seen donor recipients, or recipient families and donor families, we've been more exposed to actually how it functions and how much respect is given towards the body and towards the family, and how positively it can affect not only the recipient family but also the donor family. The donor, a lot of families actually, it helps them go through the grieving process when they can have something positive come out of the death of their loved one. So obviously now she's very pro-organ transplantation. She does a lot of fundraising activities for it. She gives speeches and presentations on it to different groups. She's an IOPO, the Indiana Organ Procurement Organization. She's a volunteer for them, as am I, and she's just a huge supporter of it now, obviously.
Maureen is dedicated to spreading the word about organ donation and has found many ways to volunteer her time to this cause.
Well, with my experience in organ donation and how beneficial it can be, I feel really strongly that it's something that people should be educated about, because even in our circumstance, when my mom needed one, she wasn't fully comfortable with the idea of her daughter becoming a potential donor. And now that she's educated and understands the process and everything that happens, she's a full supporter of it. So I think that if people were more educated about it and just weren't so afraid of it and didn't see it as like a negative thing for you to become an organ donor, a lot of lives could be saved. I mean, so many people die every year waiting for a transplant. So I think it's important to educate people. And I've recently become involved in doing pageants with the Miss America organization. And every contestant is required to have a platform that they support and that they promote, and that they would then use whatever title they win to promote. And so I chose organ donation awareness because it's very close to my heart. Obviously, I can be very passionate about it, and hopefully in my career through pageants, I'll be able to educate people a lot more on how organ donation functions.
Maureen and Glenna plan to continue their work with the Indiana Organ Procurement Organization. There are currently more than 1,500 patients on the donation waiting list in Indiana, with another person added every 10 minutes. Reporting for Fast Track, I'm Erica Seifert.